She started her day like any other, moving quickly through the narrow kitchen of the upscale restaurant. The morning sunlight filtered through the small window above the sink, catching the steam rising from the freshly brewed coffee. She wiped her hands on her apron, her movements automatic, shaped by years of routine. Every step, every gesture was practiced and precise, yet her mind was elsewhere, dreaming of a life that felt just out of reach. The restaurant was already buzzing as she stepped onto the polished floor, her shoes making soft sounds against the tiles. Patrons were settling into their seats, some chatting quietly, others reviewing the menus with intent focus. She greeted each guest with a warm smile and a polite nod, but most barely noticed her beyond the efficiency of her service. To them, she was simply the person who refilled water glasses, delivered plates of food, and made sure their experience went smoothly. Few saw anything more, and she did not mind. In her heart, she knew there was more to her than what appeared. She moved from table to table, balancing plates and glasses with careful attention. Her back ached slightly from the long hours, but she kept going, her determination stronger than her fatigue. There was a rhythm to her work, a quiet music that played in her mind as she took orders and served dishes. She loved this rhythm, even if the outside world never recognized it. It gave her a sense of control, a small space where she could be herself without the weight of expectations pressing down. Between tasks, her eyes often drifted to the grand piano in the corner of the dining area. It was polished and gleaming, a stark contrast to the busy tables around it. She had always been drawn to it, fascinated by the way the keys seemed to promise stories and emotions waiting to be released. Only a few people knew of her talent, and she had never felt the need to show it in this environment. The piano was hers in the quiet moments, a secret companion that allowed her to escape the mundane and connect with something deeper within herself. As she moved along the floor, she noticed a group of guests settling into a large table at the center of the room. They were dressed in elegant clothes, speaking in hushed tones, clearly accustomed to luxury and attention. Their presence brought a subtle tension to the air, as if the restaurant itself recognized their importance. She felt a familiar flutter of nervousness, but she reminded herself to stay focused. Her job was to serve, not to impress. The orders came quickly, demanding her full attention. She carried trays of appetizers, ensuring each plate reached the correct guest. The clinking of silverware and the soft murmur of conversation created a gentle background to her thoughts. She moved efficiently, but her mind wandered again, imagining the music she could create if only there were a moment to herself. The melodies she played in her head were vivid and alive, each note reflecting a part of her story that no one else knew. During a brief pause, she leaned against a counter, catching her breath. Her hands were warm from the dishes she had carried, and she could feel the familiar ache in her legs. Yet, there was a spark of excitement in her chest. Something in the energy of the room suggested that today might be different. She shook off the thought, reminding herself to focus on the tasks at hand. Still, she could not ignore the quiet voice in her mind, urging her to be ready for anything that might come. She glanced around the restaurant, taking in the details she often missed in the rush of her duties. The chandeliers cast gentle light across the polished wood, reflecting in the glasses and silverware. The soft music playing from hidden speakers added a comforting atmosphere, blending with the laughter and conversation of the guests. She liked to imagine that if she were on the other side of the room, she might notice the small details even more, appreciating the artistry of the space itself. One of the guests called for her attention, asking a question about the menu. She approached with a practiced smile, answering politely and offering suggestions based on their tastes. They nodded appreciatively, though she sensed they did not expect much beyond surface-level service. It was fine. She did not need their validation. Her satisfaction came from doing her job well and from the small moments of freedom she allowed herself when no one was looking. The kitchen called her back, and she returned to deliver the next course. Each movement was fluid, a combination of experience and instinct. She felt the hum of the restaurant around her, the ebb and flow of activity guiding her steps. Even in the busiest moments, she found a sense of calm, a connection to her own abilities that few outside could see. As the lunch hour progressed, she noticed the elite guests watching the room with a discerning eye. They spoke softly among themselves, occasionally exchanging glances that hinted at judgment or curiosity. She kept her interactions professional, but her mind could not help but wander to what they might think if they knew more about her. If they could hear the music she carried within, the skill that she had nurtured in secret, would they be impressed or dismissive? She pushed the thought aside, knowing it was not the time or place. The rhythm of her day continued, a steady beat that carried her from one table to the next. She refilled drinks, cleared plates, and answered questions with patience. In each small gesture, there was a dedication that went beyond mere duty. She cared deeply about the experience of each guest, even if they never truly saw her. Her work was her own form of artistry, though she longed for a more expressive outlet. During a rare quiet moment, she approached the piano and rested her hands lightly on the keys. The smooth surface sent a shiver through her fingers, and she imagined the sound that would fill the room if she pressed a single note. The thought made her heart race. She had played in empty rooms, in the privacy of her home, and sometimes in small gatherings of friends. But she had never played for an audience like this, for people who commanded attention and held influence. The idea was thrilling and terrifying at the same time. A colleague called her back to the floor, and she reluctantly stepped away. She took a deep breath, focusing once more on her duties. The moment lingered in her mind, a reminder of what she was capable of, if only she dared to step forward. She could feel the excitement building subtly, a quiet anticipation that something beyond the ordinary might happen today. As the afternoon wore on, she noticed small changes in the energy of the room. The elite guests were paying more attention to the details of the service, their eyes occasionally flicking toward the piano. She wondered if they sensed her presence in a different way, if there was something in her posture, her movements, that hinted at untapped potential. She smiled faintly to herself, keeping the thought private. By the time the main courses were served, she had settled into a steady rhythm once again. Her mind was alert, her senses attuned to every need around her. She felt a quiet pride in her ability to manage the pace and demands of the busy restaurant. Yet, the longing for expression, for recognition of her hidden talent, lingered beneath the surface. It was a quiet fire, waiting for the right moment to ignite. The lunch hour began to wind down, and the room grew slightly calmer. She took a moment to refill a water glass, noticing the subtle smiles of gratitude from a few guests. These small acknowledgments were meaningful to her, reminders that her presence, though often unnoticed, made a difference. She moved with purpose, each action deliberate, aware of the delicate balance of service and discretion. As she finished clearing a table, she glanced once more at the piano. The polished keys seemed to call to her, a silent invitation she had resisted for so long. She felt a flutter of anticipation, a sense that something was about to shift. The ordinary routine of her day had carried her to this moment, and she sensed that the quiet, hidden part of herself might finally have a chance to emerge. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of a new party, an even more distinguished group of guests entering the restaurant. The atmosphere shifted subtly, a heightened awareness settling over the room. She greeted them with her usual warmth and efficiency, but inside, her heart beat faster. She could feel that the day was moving toward something significant, that the rhythm of her ordinary life might soon intersect with an extraordinary opportunity. She continued her work, serving dishes with care and attention. Every movement was precise, every smile genuine. Yet, the anticipation in her chest grew stronger. She imagined what it would feel like to let her talent be known, to let the music she carried within fill the room. The thought both thrilled and terrified her, a delicate balance she had never dared to confront. The afternoon stretched on, and the restaurant began to quiet as the final orders were taken. She completed her duties with a mixture of relief and longing. The day had passed as many others had, yet it felt different. There was a tension in the air, a sense that something beyond the ordinary was waiting just around the corner. She knew that her life could change in a moment, if only she had the courage to step forward. As she prepared to leave the kitchen briefly, She cast one last glance at the piano. It stood there silently, gleaming under the soft light, a promise of possibility. She felt a surge of determination, a quiet voice urging her to be ready, to embrace whatever opportunity might come. She smiled to herself, feeling the spark of excitement that had been growing all day. She did not know what would happen next, but she knew that her secret skill, her hidden gift, was waiting for the right moment to be revealed. And deep down, she felt that today might finally be that moment. The afternoon moved into early evening, and the restaurant began to take on a quieter, more intimate atmosphere. The sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting warm golden light across the polished floors. She moved between tables, serving the last of the early diners with care and attention, but her mind was restless. She could feel the tension in the air, an unspoken expectation that something special might happen tonight. A large announcement came over the intercom. The manager's voice was calm but carried a hint of urgency. There had been a small change to the evening schedule. The regular entertainer, a pianist who often performed for the higher-end guests, had been delayed due to traffic. There was a pause, and she could see the worry flicker across the manager's face. He looked around the room, assessing options, clearly hoping someone could fill in at short notice. She felt a sudden flutter of nerves. Her heart beat faster as she glanced at the grand piano in the corner, gleaming under the soft lights. She knew she had played that piano before in quiet moments, but never for anyone else, especially not for a group of people who expected perfection. Her stomach twisted with a mixture of excitement and fear. She tried to calm herself, telling her mind to focus on the work at hand. The manager approached her, glancing around to make sure no one else was available. "Do you play?" he asked casually, though there was a hint of desperation in his voice. He didn't seem to expect a serious answer. She felt her throat tighten. She had never revealed her skill in this setting before. It was a secret she had kept close to her heart, reserved for quiet evenings and private practice. "Yes," she said softly, almost whispering, as if speaking too loudly might break the fragile courage she felt building inside. The manager's eyes widened slightly. He hadn't expected her to answer so confidently. "I can try," she added, her voice steadier now. The words felt strange on her lips, as if she were stepping into a world she had only imagined. He nodded, a mixture of relief and caution in his expression. "The guests will be arriving soon," he said. "Just do what you can. Keep it simple if needed." He gave her a small, encouraging smile before returning to oversee other preparations. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on her shoulders. This was it, the chance she had never dared to claim before. As she approached the piano, she felt her hands tremble slightly. The polished keys glimmered, reflecting the soft light above. She rested her fingers gently on them, feeling the familiar smoothness under her touch. Memories of past practice sessions came flooding back. The hours spent alone, learning each note, feeling the music rise from the keys. It was her private world, one she had nurtured carefully. Now it was about to be shared with strangers, and the thought both thrilled and terrified her. The first guests began to take their seats, and she could feel their attention shifting subtly toward the piano. They did not yet know that she would be playing, but she sensed the unspoken expectation in the room. The elite audience, used to the highest standards, would notice even the smallest mistake. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to take a deep breath and center her thoughts. She reminded herself that this was not about perfection, it was about expression. Her fingers hovered over the keys, and she let the first note ring out. It was soft and tentative, but it carried a warmth that drew the room into quiet attention. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the music flow naturally. Each note seemed to unlock a part of her she had kept hidden, a depth of feeling that had never been seen by anyone beyond a few close friends. The room, once filled with chatter and movement, now held a gentle silence, broken only by the sound of the piano. As she continued to play, her confidence began to grow. The initial nervousness melted away, replaced by a sense of purpose. She allowed herself to move with the music, letting her emotions guide her fingers across the keys. The melodies rose and fell, soft and contemplative at times, bold and passionate at others. She could feel the audience reacting, the subtle shifts in energy as they leaned in, listened more intently, and allowed themselves to be carried by the music. One of the guests, a woman seated near the center, leaned forward slightly, her eyes widening in surprise. She whispered something to her companion, who nodded, clearly impressed. The realization that her music could touch these people, that it could reach them beyond the surface of appearances, sent a thrill through her chest. She had never imagined this moment, never believed that the skill she had kept secret could command such attention. The restaurant seemed to transform around her. The clinking of glasses and soft murmurs faded into the background, leaving only the piano and the subtle energy of the listeners. She felt a connection, not just to the instrument, but to the people experiencing the music. It was a fragile, electric bond, one that required her full presence. Each note was a conversation, each chord a bridge between her inner world and the attentive audience. Her performance flowed naturally without conscious thought. She improvised slightly, letting instinct guide her, and the result was a melody that felt alive, immediate, and real. She could hear the quiet gasps, the whispered reactions, the appreciative nods. Her heart swelled with a mix of relief and exhilaration. This was the moment she had imagined countless times in her private practice, but now it was real, tangible, and utterly transformative. As the piece progressed, she noticed the elite audience leaning in further, their expressions shifting from polite interest to genuine admiration. The music seemed to reach beyond their usual facades, touching something human and vulnerable. She realized that this was not about showing off or seeking approval. It was about sharing a part of herself that had long remained hidden. And in that sharing, she felt a profound connection she had never experienced before. A few moments later, she transitioned into a more lively, rhythmic section. The energy in the room changed subtly, becoming more vibrant. Some of the guests tapped their fingers lightly on the table, others smiled in quiet delight. She felt the music lifting, carrying her forward, and she let herself be fully present, enjoying the interaction without fear of judgment. It was as if the piano had become an extension of her own voice, and through it, she could speak to the audience in a language beyond words. During a brief pause between pieces, she allowed herself a glance at the audience. The expressions on their faces told her everything she needed to know. They were captivated, genuinely moved by the skill and emotion in her playing. A few whispered among themselves, clearly impressed by the unexpected talent unfolding before them. She felt a surge of gratitude and courage. This was not a fleeting moment. It was a turning point, a bridge from her quiet, hidden world into something larger. The manager watched from a distance, his eyes wide with amazement. He had known she was talented, but the way she held the room, commanded attention, and conveyed emotion surpassed anything he had anticipated. He smiled faintly, recognizing that the opportunity she had been given had unlocked something extraordinary. The other staff moved discreetly, giving her the space to continue without interruption, aware that the moment was delicate and precious. Her fingers moved with growing confidence, each note more assured than the last. She allowed herself to explore variations, subtle nuances, and unexpected harmonies. The audience responded instinctively, drawn into the ebb and flow of the performance. It was as if they could feel the passion and dedication she had poured into her craft over the years. The music became a shared experience, a silent dialogue that transcended words, class, or status. For the first time, she realized the power of her own talent. It was not merely a skill or a hobby. It was a voice, a presence that could touch lives and leave a lasting impression. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, a recognition that this hidden part of herself was worthy of attention and admiration. The initial fear that had gripped her was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence that radiated from every note she played. As she neared the end of the piece, the room held a collective breath. The final chords resonated, lingering in the air like a gentle echo. The audience remained silent for a moment, caught in the spell of what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the room, soft at first and then growing in strength. She lifted her hands from the keys, heart racing, cheeks flushed with a mixture of relief and joy. The manager approached, his expression a mixture of pride and awe. He placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered a quiet congratulations. She nodded, unable to find words, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. The elite audience continued to applaud, some rising to their feet, their faces lit with genuine admiration. She had stepped out of her ordinary life and into something extraordinary, and the impact was undeniable. As the guests began to settle back into conversation, she allowed herself a quiet moment to breathe and reflect. She realized that her life would not be the same after this night. The secret skill she had nurtured in private had found its moment in the world, and the experience had given her a new sense of possibility. She could feel the excitement simmering beneath the surface, a promise that this was only the beginning of something larger, something that could transform not only her life, but also the way she viewed herself. The evening continued, but she moved among the tables with a renewed sense of purpose. Her usual tasks took on new meaning, and even the simplest interactions carried a subtle glow. She knew that she had crossed a threshold, stepping from a hidden world of talent into the open, where her abilities could inspire, captivate, and leave a lasting impression. And in that realization, she found a quiet, profound joy, knowing that her moment had come and that she had embraced it fully. As the applause settled into a soft murmur, she remained at the piano, her fingers lightly brushing the keys, feeling the echoes of the last notes still hanging in the air. The room was quiet now, but it was not the silence of emptiness. It was the expectant, attentive silence of people who had just glimpsed something extraordinary. Her heart raced with a mixture of exhilaration and disbelief. She had stepped into the spotlight and shared a part of herself that had always been private, and the response was more than she had ever imagined. The elite audience watched her with curiosity and a new kind of respect. Their eyes followed every subtle movement of her hands across the keys, every shift of expression on her face. Some whispered to their companions, clearly impressed by the unexpected talent they had just witnessed. She had seen polite applause before, but this was different. This was genuine, heartfelt acknowledgement of skill, passion, and presence. She took a deep breath and allowed herself to relax into the music again. This time, she played with more confidence, letting the melodies flow naturally, without hesitation. Each chord carried emotion, soft and tender, bold and expressive. She experimented with tempo and dynamics, testing the waters, feeling the room's energy respond to her choices. The audience leaned in, attentive and absorbed, as if the music had wrapped the entire space in a gentle, invisible thread. A small smile crept onto her face as she noticed a few of the guests nodding slightly to the rhythm, unconsciously swaying in time with the music. She felt a deep sense of connection with them, a shared understanding that went beyond words. For the first time, she realized that her music could bridge the gap between her hidden world and the lives of people who, until now, had seemed distant and untouchable. It was a powerful, humbling realization. The music began to take on a narrative quality. She let her fingers tell a story, moving from quiet, reflective passages to more intense, dramatic sequences. Each section conveyed emotion without needing explanation, speaking directly to the hearts of the listeners. She felt the tension in the room ease, replaced by an openness, a willingness to be carried along by her gift. It was as if the audience had been waiting for this moment, even if they did not know it themselves. One man in the center, leaning back in his chair, allowed himself a small, impressed chuckle as a particularly playful sequence danced across the keys. A woman nearby clasped her hands lightly, eyes shining with appreciation. The energy in the room shifted subtly, becoming warmer, more intimate. She could feel the attention settle firmly on her, but it was not oppressive. It was encouraging, inviting, and it fueled her confidence. She took a brief pause between sections, letting the silence linger. It was a deliberate choice, giving space for the audience to breathe and absorb the emotion she had already conveyed. In that quiet, she could feel her own heartbeat, steady and strong. She realized that she was no longer just playing for herself, She was playing for them, and in doing so, she had found a new layer of purpose in her talent. This was no longer a secret, hidden away. It was a living, breathing part of her existence, now shared and appreciated. The next section of music emerged more boldly, her fingers dancing across the keys with a sense of freedom she had never fully experienced. She allowed herself to improvise slightly, following the instinct of the moment. The melody rose and fell with natural grace, carrying a sense of journey and discovery. She could hear soft gasps and murmurs from the audience, subtle acknowledgments of the unexpected beauty they were witnessing. She glanced briefly at the manager, who stood at a distance, eyes wide with astonishment and pride. He had believed in her skill, but this exceeded even his highest expectations. He gave a slight nod, silently encouraging her to continue. The support, though quiet, bolstered her courage. She realized that she was not alone in this moment. Even those who had previously been strangers were now part of a shared experience, drawn together by music and emotion. As the performance continued, she felt herself becoming fully immersed in the sound. Each note was an extension of her thoughts, feelings, and memories. She thought of the countless hours she had spent practicing alone, of the quiet moments where she had explored melodies that no one else would hear. Now, those private pieces of herself were alive in the room, resonating with the audience in ways she had never dared to imagine. She allowed the music to take on a narrative arc, moving from gentle, introspective passages to lively, spirited sequences. She played with subtle dynamics, the rising crescendos and delicate decrescendos drawing the audience into an emotional journey. Some of the guests' eyes were closed, their expressions softened, as if they were reliving personal memories through the music. Others watched intently, fascinated by the skill and passion that flowed effortlessly from her hands. A sense of joy and liberation washed over her. The nervousness that had gripped her earlier in the evening was gone, replaced by a profound sense of purpose. She realized that this was more than a performance. It was a declaration of her own potential. For the first time, she understood that her hidden talent could touch lives, inspire respect, and create a space of shared humanity. It was a revelation, both humbling and empowering. The music swelled to a climactic passage, her fingers moving faster, more assuredly, as she poured every ounce of emotion into the keys. The room seemed to hold its breath, the energy almost tangible, as the audience was swept along in the waves of sound. She could feel their engagement, their awe, and it pushed her to give even more, to reach deeper into her own creativity and emotion. Each note was a conversation, each chord a connection that transcended words. As she approached the conclusion of the piece, she allowed the tempo to slow, returning to a gentle, reflective cadence. Her hands lingered on the keys, savoring the final moments of expression. The audience remained silent, captivated, until the last note faded into a hushed stillness. Then, as if on cue, the room erupted into applause, stronger and more enthusiastic than she had anticipated. Some guests rose from their seats, their faces alight with admiration and delight. She lifted her hands from the keys, her chest heaving slightly from the exertion and emotion. A wave of relief and fulfillment washed over her. She had done it. She had revealed her secret skill to the world, and it had been received with warmth and appreciation. The audience's reaction was more than she could have hoped for. It was affirmation, recognition, and respect all at once. The manager approached again, his expression a mix of pride and awe. He quietly complimented her, acknowledging the courage and talent she had displayed. She nodded, a shy smile on her face, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the lights or the applause. It was the satisfaction of having shared a part of herself honestly, fully, and successfully. She had stepped out of the shadows and into a moment of genuine connection, and it felt extraordinary. As the evening continued, she noticed small conversations among the guests about her performance. Words of admiration and surprise were exchanged quietly, and a few guests approached her to express their appreciation directly. Their compliments were heartfelt, not superficial, and she felt a deep sense of validation that went beyond mere recognition of skill. It was an acknowledgement of her courage, her authenticity, and the unique voice she had brought to the room. The music had changed more than the atmosphere of the restaurant. It had changed her. She felt a newfound confidence in herself, a sense that her talent could no longer be hidden. The experience had shown her that taking a risk, stepping into the unknown, could lead to moments of profound reward. It was a lesson she would carry with her, a reminder that the gifts she possessed were worthy of being shared. Even as she returned to her usual duties, clearing tables and refilling drinks, there was a subtle difference in her demeanor. She moved with a quiet pride, a lightness in her step that had not been there before. The interactions with guests were infused with a gentle glow, a reflection of the joy she had found in revealing her secret skill. She knew that her life had shifted, even if in small ways, and that this moment would remain a defining memory. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror behind the bar, and for the first time, she saw not just a waitress, but an artist, a performer, and a person capable of stepping into her own power. The reflection was both familiar and new, a reminder of who she had always been and who she was becoming. She smiled to herself, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey she had begun, and the path that lay ahead. The room gradually returned to its usual rhythm, the murmurs of conversation filling the space once more. Yet, there was a lingering sense of magic, a subtle hum of energy that remained in the air. The elite audience had witnessed something unexpected, something unforgettable, and she had been the one to create it. The knowledge of that impact stayed with her, a quiet thrill that would not fade easily. As she prepared to step away from the piano and return fully to her service duties, she allowed herself one last, deep breath. She knew that this performance had been a turning point, a moment where her hidden world had intersected with reality in a profound and transformative way. The applause, the admiration, and the shared emotional experience were more than she could have imagined, and they would serve as a lasting reminder of her courage and talent. The evening moved forward, but for her, nothing would ever feel quite the same. She had discovered the power of stepping into her own light, of revealing the parts of herself she had kept secret. And as she continued to move through the restaurant, tending to guests and completing her tasks with care, she carried with her the memory of the music, the connection, and the awe that had filled the room. It was a beginning, a promise, and a transformation all at once. The soft murmur of conversation in the restaurant had quieted almost entirely, leaving only the gentle hum of anticipation. She sat at the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys, as she allowed herself a moment to breathe. The reactions from the audience had been more powerful than she could have imagined, and a quiet thrill ran through her. Every glance, every subtle nod, told her that they were captivated, hanging on every note she might play next. She started again, this time with a more deliberate approach. Each note was measured, carrying both delicacy and intensity. She allowed herself to be fully present in the moment, feeling the emotions flow through her and out into the room. The audience responded instinctively, leaning forward in their chairs, their eyes following the subtle movements of her hands, the slight shifts of her expression, the rise and fall of her posture as she became one with the music. The melodies she played were layered with emotion. Some passages were soft and reflective, drawing the listeners into quiet contemplation, while others rose with energy and passion, filling the room with a vibrant intensity. She noticed a few of the guests exchanging astonished glances, silently acknowledging the unexpected depth of her performance. Their reactions gave her courage, each silent affirmation strengthening her connection to them and urging her to continue exploring the full range of her ability. For the first time, she began to sense a dialogue between herself and the audience. The music was no longer just an expression of her own feelings. It had become a medium through which she could reach out to them, touch something deep and universal. She could feel their emotions shifting in response to her choices, and she let that guide her fingers across the keys. It was a delicate, unspoken conversation, one that required trust, attention, and sensitivity. The room seemed to transform around her. The usual clatter of dishes and soft murmurs of conversation had disappeared, replaced by a collective attentiveness. The elite audience, often accustomed to formality and distance, was now visibly engaged, experiencing something intimate despite the grandeur of the setting. She realized that her music had the power to create connection, to bridge gaps between people, and to evoke emotions that might otherwise remain unspoken. She allowed herself to become more adventurous, introducing subtle variations in rhythm and unexpected harmonies. Each note became an opportunity to surprise and delight, and the audience responded with instinctive attentiveness. Some leaned forward, intrigued by the shift in tone, while others closed their eyes, allowing the music to wash over them. She could sense their appreciation, not just for the skill she displayed, but for the honesty and emotion embedded in every chord. A young woman sitting near the center table smiled, her eyes sparkling as she whispered a comment to her companion. A man at the edge of the room tapped a finger lightly on the table, following the rhythm without realizing it. These small reactions, subtle and unassuming, meant more to her than grand gestures. They were proof that her music had touched them in a personal way, reaching beyond the surface of appearances and into something deeper. As she continued, she noticed how the atmosphere shifted subtly with each phrase. The audience was not only listening, they were feeling. Their reactions were authentic, unguarded, a reflection of the connection that had formed through her playing. She allowed herself to smile quietly, acknowledging the impact she was having. It was a rare, humbling experience, one that she had never expected in the midst of a typical evening at work. The piece evolved into a more dynamic section, full of intricate rhythms and delicate pauses that required precise timing. Her fingers moved with grace and confidence, guided by instinct and emotion rather than conscious thought. She felt the energy of the room feeding back into her performance, encouraging her to explore the full potential of her ability. The interaction was subtle but powerful, a mutual exchange of presence and energy that elevated both performer and audience. A few guests exchanged glances, clearly impressed by the technical skill and emotional depth of her performance. One leaned forward, eyes wide with curiosity, as if trying to anticipate the next note. Another placed a hand over her heart, moved by the intimacy and sincerity conveyed through the music. These moments, fleeting and silent, created a tapestry of response that enveloped the room, binding them together in shared experience. She let the melody take on a narrative quality, telling a story that unfolded gradually. There were moments of tension, followed by release, passages of contemplation and introspection, and sequences of joyful energy. Each transition was deliberate, a reflection of her own journey and the emotions she had carried quietly for so long. The audience, captivated and attentive, followed the ebb and flow with silent awe, fully immersed in the music. Her confidence grew with every passing moment. The initial hesitation that had gripped her at the start of the evening was now replaced by a deep sense of assurance. She understood that she was not merely performing for recognition or approval. She was expressing herself fully, sharing a part of her soul that had remained hidden. The audience's reactions were a confirmation of the authenticity and power of that expression, and it filled her with joy and fulfillment. A few people began to whisper softly to one another, clearly discussing the unexpected talent unfolding before them. She could sense their amazement, the disbelief that someone in such an ordinary role could possess such extraordinary skill. The realization that her music could surprise, delight, and move people from all walks of life strengthened her resolve. She allowed herself to embrace the moment fully, to explore the depths of her creativity without restraint. As the piece progressed, she introduced subtle shifts in tempo and dynamics, creating tension and release that held the audience's attention. The room was fully engaged, every listener responding instinctively to the changes in mood and tone. She could see the soft smiles, the gentle nods, the quiet expressions of wonder. Each small reaction reinforced her confidence, allowing her to play with freedom and spontaneity. She began to improvise lightly, weaving delicate variations into the melody, exploring harmonies that felt natural and expressive. The audience was enthralled, absorbed by the unfolding music, and she felt a profound sense of connection with them. It was as if the piano had become a bridge, linking her private world with theirs, creating a shared space of emotion, understanding, and appreciation. A few guests were visibly moved, their expressions softening as they leaned back and allowed themselves to be carried by the music. Others were captivated by the technical skill, marveling at the precision and fluidity of her playing. She felt a surge of pride, tempered by humility, knowing that the moment was not about ego but about communication and connection. Each note, each pause, each subtle inflection was a message, a reflection of her journey and her inner self. She continued to explore the emotional range of the piece, moving from quiet, tender passages to more expressive and bold sequences. The audience followed her lead, responding instinctively, their attention unwavering. She could sense the collective breath of the room, the subtle shifts in posture and expression as they were carried along by the ebb and flow of the music. It was a rare, magical experience, one that transcended the ordinary confines of the restaurant. Her hands moved effortlessly across the keys, guided by instinct, memory, and emotion. She felt the music speaking through her, conveying feelings that words could not capture. The audience was silent, rapt, completely absorbed in the performance. She allowed herself to savor the moment, the thrill of sharing a hidden talent and witnessing its impact on others. It was a profound affirmation of her courage, dedication, and artistry. As the final section approached, she slowed the tempo, allowing the music to settle into a gentle, reflective cadence. Each note was deliberate, measured, and full of feeling. The audience remained silent, fully immersed in the experience, until the last chord faded into a soft, lingering resonance. The room held its collective breath for a moment longer before breaking into warm, heartfelt applause. The sound was overwhelming, affirming, and deeply moving. She lifted her hands from the keys, feeling a mixture of relief, joy, and pride. The elite audience was clearly impressed, some rising to their feet, others leaning forward to offer quiet admiration. The impact of her performance was undeniable, and she could sense the ripple of awe that extended through the room. It was a moment of connection, validation, and recognition, all woven together by the power of her music. The manager approached, his expression a mixture of astonishment and pride. He quietly praised her, acknowledging both the talent and courage she had displayed. She nodded, a shy smile on her face, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had revealed her secret skill, shared her passion, and created a moment that would be remembered by those who had witnessed it. The experience was transformative, both for her and for the audience. Even as the evening continued and guests returned to conversation, the energy in the room remained charged with the memory of the performance. She moved among the tables with renewed confidence and purpose, tending to her duties with a sense of pride and joy. The realization that her hidden talent could create such an impact filled her with hope and excitement for the future. She knew that her life had changed, that a new chapter had begun, and that her secret skill would never again be confined to quiet, solitary moments. The applause continued to echo in the restaurant as she lowered her hands from the piano keys, her chest heaving from the exertion and the emotion of the performance. The elite audience remained engaged, some standing, others leaning forward, clearly stunned by what they had just witnessed. She felt a deep sense of relief mixed with exhilaration. This had been more than a performance. It had been a revelation, a moment where her hidden talent had become undeniable, visible to the world, and appreciated for its full depth. The manager approached cautiously, a mix of pride and awe in his eyes. "That was incredible," he said quietly. "I didn't know you had that in you." She smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. It was not just the praise, it was the acknowledgement that her skills, long hidden and quietly nurtured, had finally been recognized. For years, she had practiced in private, uncertain if anyone would ever see the worth of her talent. Tonight, she had given it life, and it had been received with more admiration than she could have imagined. The audience, still in awe, began to whisper among themselves. Compliments floated through the room, some shy, some bold, all genuine. One guest, an older man with discerning eyes, nodded toward her and said softly to his companion, "Remarkable. I've never expected this from someone in her position." She overheard the words and felt a surge of validation. It wasn't about the recognition itself. It was about being seen for who she truly was, beyond her job and the ordinary expectations others placed on her. As she returned to her service duties, there was a subtle but unmistakable change in the atmosphere. The staff moved around her with renewed respect. Guests treated her differently, and she carried herself with a quiet confidence that had not existed before. Even the simple acts of refilling glasses and clearing plates felt different, imbued with a sense of purpose and pride. The realization that she had changed, even if only subtly, gave her a warm glow that was impossible to ignore. Throughout the evening, more guests approached her to offer personal compliments. Some were eloquent, praising her talent and emotional depth. Others simply nodded with a quiet smile, clearly moved. Each interaction reinforced her confidence, reminding her that the hidden skills she had cultivated were not only real but capable of inspiring awe. She realized that her talent was no longer just a private joy. It was a gift that could reach others, a form of expression that could leave a lasting impact. A few of the guests asked if she had studied music formally. She shook her head, smiling softly, and explained that it had been a personal journey, a passion nurtured quietly over the years. They listened with genuine curiosity and respect, some even expressing amazement that someone could develop such skill without formal recognition. Their reactions made her feel a connection that transcended social status, education, or background. In that moment, she understood the universal language of talent and emotion, and how it could create bonds across seemingly insurmountable divides. The manager, still watching from a distance, approached again and suggested that she consider performing at more events or in settings where her skill could be showcased. She felt a mixture of excitement and hesitation. The idea of stepping further into the spotlight was daunting, yet the experience of the evening had shown her that she was capable. The audience had responded, not just politely but with genuine admiration and engagement. For the first time, she considered the possibility of pursuing this talent beyond the quiet privacy she had always maintained. As the restaurant gradually returned to its normal pace, she noticed the lingering effect of her performance. Guests continued to comment to each other, their conversations subtly infused with references to her music. The energy in the room was different, warmer, more connected. She felt proud, not from ego or desire for attention, but from the knowledge that she had contributed something meaningful, something that had altered the mood and the experience of everyone present. In quiet moments between service tasks, she returned briefly to the piano. Her fingers brushed over the keys, feeling the familiar smoothness, and she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Years of practice, patience, and quiet dedication had culminated in this transformative evening. She had faced the fear of revealing a hidden part of herself and had emerged stronger, more confident, and fully aware of her own capabilities. It was a lesson she would carry forward, a reminder that courage and authenticity could open doors she had never imagined. Some of the guests lingered near the piano, quietly watching her or commenting on the performance to one another. She could feel their appreciation, their curiosity, and their respect. The realization that her talent could inspire this level of admiration and engagement filled her with a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. It was not simply about applause or recognition. It was about creating an emotional impact, a connection that transcended ordinary interaction. Later, as the restaurant began to empty, she walked among the tables, completing the remaining tasks with a sense of calm and contentment. The guests who had been present for her performance offered final words of admiration and thanks, and she received them with a quiet smile, feeling the genuine weight of their appreciation. She understood now that her music had touched lives in ways she had only dreamed of, and that the experience would stay with both her and the audience long after the evening ended. After the last guest had left, she returned to the piano one final time, sitting quietly and allowing herself a moment to reflect. The room was still, the lights soft, and she could feel the lingering energy of the evening. She played a few gentle notes, savoring the feeling of connection, the memories of the awe and admiration, and the validation that her hidden talent was both real and valuable. It was a private moment, yet it carried the echoes of the shared experience, a bridge between her private passion and the world that had witnessed it. She realized that this night marked a turning point, not just for her career, but for her self-perception. She had always been diligent, patient, and humble, but the experience had shown her that her abilities could command attention and inspire respect. The performance had been a declaration of her identity, a testament to her dedication, and a powerful reminder that hidden talents, when revealed, could transform lives, including her own. Her thoughts drifted to the future. She imagined opportunities where she could continue to share her gift, where her skill could reach a wider audience. The fear that had previously held her back seemed smaller now, replaced by a quiet determination and confidence. She understood that the journey would not be without challenges, but the knowledge of what she had accomplished gave her courage. The evening had proven that taking risks and stepping into the unknown could lead to profound and rewarding experiences. As she finally left the piano, she felt a sense of closure and completion. The audience had witnessed her talent, and she had given them more than just music. They had experienced her passion, her expression, and her courage. She carried that experience with her, a memory that would continue to inspire and shape her future choices. It was a powerful affirmation of her potential, a validation of the years she had spent honing her skill in secret. The manager lingered for a moment, offering one last compliment before attending to other duties. She nodded in thanks, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The evening had been transformative for both of them, and she recognized the importance of the support and encouragement she had received. It was a reminder that recognition and opportunity often came from those who believed in her, even when she had doubted herself. As she walked through the emptying restaurant toward the back, she reflected on the reactions of the elite audience. They had been captivated, engaged, and inspired by her performance. Some had approached to offer praise, others had quietly absorbed the experience, and all had been affected in some way by the music she had shared. The realization of her impact filled her with a profound sense of satisfaction and joy. It was more than she had ever hoped for, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She paused briefly, looking around at the polished floors, the soft lighting, and the now quiet dining area. This space, which had always been a place of routine work and service, had become a stage for transformation, a setting for her personal breakthrough. She had taken a risk, revealed a hidden part of herself, and been met with admiration, respect, and genuine awe. The experience had been transformative, and she understood that her life would never be quite the same again. As she finally left the restaurant for the night, she carried with her a quiet sense of triumph and possibility. She knew that the performance had been more than an isolated event. It had been a demonstration of her courage, skill, and authenticity. The impact on the audience had been real and lasting, and the experience had reshaped her perception of herself. She walked into the night with a new confidence, a sense of purpose, and the knowledge that her hidden talents were worthy of being shared and celebrated. She understood that the journey ahead would hold new opportunities, challenges, and moments of expression. The evening had proven that her music could touch lives, create connection, and inspire admiration. It had revealed the power of taking risks, embracing courage, and stepping fully into one's abilities. She felt ready to explore that potential, to continue sharing her gift, and to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. For the first time in a long time, she felt that the world was open to her, and she was ready to step forward, no longer hiding her talent, and no longer doubting the worth of what she had to offer.